Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast over here at Katie's House Foundation. I'm Kirsten Vanderjack with Katie's House, now EXP Realty and Templeview Capital, of course. And I have Julie, our co-host and interim CEO on. Julie, how are you?
Very good. I'm out in California, sunny California today. It's awesome.
Awesome. So, hey, today we are going to talk about what if this happened to your spouse or your child. And before we jump into that, I just wanted to touch on the pad split series that we were doing, and we'll kind of continue down that path here and there on the YouTube channel. One thing I wanted to mention around this week, since we talk about kind of the weekly tea, was what we were seeing is some pad split investors. So people who own houses and they rent them out by the room, and they use pad split as a platform to basically bring in the people who rent the rooms, which is awesome. We will drop some links below. If you guys want to rent a room via pad split, please use our link. If you're an investor and you want to put your house on pad split, please use our referral link. The money that might come in, they might throw us a couple dollars. I don't know what it is, but it does go to our 501c3. So we can continue helping people who actually don't necessarily use pad split, but they use government funding. So like they get Veterans Way funding, United Way helps with veterans to provide housing and other types of individuals. And then, of course, there's drug court, there's Section 8, there's all kinds of government funded housing. Not enough of it, right? Julie, what do you think? Not enough?
Not enough. I know one of the topics we're going to talk about today is, it can happen to anyone, right? And so I think just the smallest things sometimes can set people back. So yeah, if they can get a little bit of subsidy, just to even, I think I talked to somebody this week that was able to get some kind of subsidy if they could prove that they were working. So yeah, I mean, there's just not enough sometimes because people, it takes 2 weeks to earn a paycheck on the right job. You can't necessarily get paid right away.
Yeah. So when, what we saw was investors want to lease their house to nonprofits, and then the nonprofit is responsible for filling the rooms. And that is very much what Katie's House Foundation does. And then also teaching financial literacy to teenagers and adults, and then also how to run a co-living house with either a nonprofit overlay or not. We teach that too. So that way people can operate a house that is, of course, healthy and safe, right? There's security systems and there's a lot of policies and procedures that go into operating a co-living house, regardless of if pad split helps fill the rooms, or if you are going to operate it yourself, or if you're going to let a nonprofit operate it for you. Hopefully they are following some of the best practices that we talk about. And so anyhow, today we're going to talk about what if this happened to your spouse or child? And basically what this is around is I received a call today, somebody asking for help because their wife was prescribed painkillers, and she actually is in the pharmacy world. And so she knows all about medication. And unfortunately, she became addicted to these. And over the course of a few years, she was in charge with the house's finances. And there are children who live in the house. Of course, she's married. And things just continued to deteriorate to a point of, Julie, you and I talk about this, where people think like it's never going to happen, where they're going to get into a situation and then they wait till the last minute to find housing because they think they can fix the situation, and then they literally can't, and they've spent all their money trying to avoid an eviction or a car repossession, and then within a few short weeks they have nothing. And this could happen to any spouse. And the reason that I bring this up is because if this was my husband, I would put everything that I could into getting him clean and sober. But if he lost his job, that would financially impact the household, but also mentally, I would be struggling, right, with holding my job down because I would be so worried about what was happening. And so there's so many facets to this. And if, you know,
And
Julia,
it's not just your job that you're holding down. You're holding down the household. You're holding down you're the CEO, the CFO. That's a lot of pressure.
so as a police officer and, you know, an investor and a mother and a wife, I mean, what do you think about this? What should somebody do if, I mean, hypothetically, if this was your husband, what would you do?
Well, I definitely would, work on I think I would try to, like you said, I would try not to put my head in the sand, I would ask for help as soon as I could so that I could try to even out as much as I could. Even if I knew I wasn't going to be able to keep my house, I would be able to transition to a rental or somewhere else that I wouldn't completely lose the fact that now, I'm not just, losing the other paycheck that was coming in. I'm losing the person that I love to something that's controlling them. And now I'm to the point where it's like I have to think about myself and my kids, and I have to try to protect them and put them in the best position. So yeah, I think that, if it was me, I would try to ask for help right away and try to get into situations where I knew I had somewhere to go. If instead of just putting my head in the sand, because really, as much as, you and I talk about this a lot, it makes it worse down the line when you put your head in the sand and you don't try to get help from anyone, that you end up wanting to use the drugs or you end up wanting to self-medicate some other way because it's just so stressful.
Yeah. And, one thing that came up was the fact that the hospital where she worked, my understanding is maybe they didn't offer her treatment, and they fired her. And that could happen to anyone too. You're just really not in control. And so this is something that goes from being a prescription medication, which, I'm sure people are kind of aware of this. And then all of a sudden you become chemically dependent upon it. And now you're doing whatever you can to get a hold of it. And you're not admitting, that I have a problem, somebody, like the person, of course, and seeking help. And if you are seeking help, you're doing your best to hold it together. And so, of course, I personally think AA and NA and the 12-step program are amazing, whether you use drugs or you don't use drugs or alcohol. I think that it's a great program for people for free therapy. It's very convenient. It's all over the world. But anyways, people are trying to help themselves, hopefully. And if this is your spouse, hopefully you're supporting them, like going to these meetings or going to treatment, and you're not mad at them because that just layers on the issues. But you are having to deal with this new world. And in this case, what happened is that, you have children involved, and now you become homeless and you have no vehicles, and you never thought this was going to happen to you. How did it get like this? How now maybe the other person loses their job because it could be not even their own fault. Maybe the company just downsizes. And now you have to go and find a place, but the shelters are full. And the foster care is not that great. It's very dependent on the operator of the house. And so in this case, you have a few men, like the husband and some sons, who are floating around. And then you have the women who are staying in, I don't know that it would be a place that most people would want to stay, especially not with a teenage daughter. And what are they supposed to do? I mean, you're in public services, Julie. I mean, what is that mother? What are they supposed to do?
Don't think that I don't see all the time. I see people living out of hotels that have lost stuff, but they're still working. They're working just enough to keep that hotel room for a day or two, and they're asking for money on Facebook. They're going to some of the homeless places, but as you may have experience with that. Any of the day shelters that will help them retain their jobs, help them get the, clothes or food. Cause that's really, basic things that you need right away is, I think housing comes third, right? You need food and you need something to do, either it be work, or whatever. And so you go from this, I need food to survive because I need water every day. I need food every day. And then, you get the help from some of these day centers. But if you don't follow the protocol and you don't do what the caseworker is asking you to do at these centers, then, it's like your ability to get some of this extra help isn't going to be there because you can't follow through because now you're self-medicating, or, you've got so much going on that you just don't have the facility anymore. Your mind can't take it. Your body can't take it. And yeah, it's hard. I mean, it can happen to anybody, but we definitely, need to try to keep people on a better path from the beginning so that they don't go too far down.
You said something interesting right now. You said you think housing is the third thing down. So food and water, do you think those are the same category for number one? And then number two is what, following the day shelter's protocol? Because if you lose their assistance, then you lose number one.
Well, or your work, right? I mean, it's either you're getting help from some, church, organization, somewhere that you've gone to say, like, I really can't, there's too much here. I've got too many plates spinning. I don't have housing. I don't have food. I'm losing my job. I can't, I don't have anywhere for my kids to go. I can't pay for daycare. And yeah, I mean, but most importantly, I think on the chain, you need food on a daily basis, right? We want housing, but it's hard, right? Because that's the one thing that we're working for, we're paying for. And that's where, if you start to lose that benefit of having money, like you said, you've got one person that lost their income, the other person may be able to sustain it for a little bit, but for how long, depending on what your budget was, right? Do they have a budget? Do they have good financial backing? Can they survive a month or two without any income?
Well, so now let's talk about, they are now at this spot, right? Like yeah. I mean, what do you really do when you don't have a car or housing? And you would know this more than anyone, right? Because you come into people that are frequently homeless. And in this case, this individual has called everyone in their huge city of 200,000 people and asked for help as public services, so they claim. And the resources are so, I actually been called too, and I couldn't even get through to a police officer on a non-emergency line. I couldn't. I got rerouted and rerouted and rerouted. And I couldn't believe that, because I don't live in that city, I couldn't get a hold of a police officer.
Well, so, I mean, a lot of times, I'm obviously going to get called there, right? I'm going to get called and I'm going to have to deal with this person either. I mean, I've even been called the fast food chain on a Christmas Eve, hey, we're closing up. This guy's got to go, It's like, where are you going to go? Okay, where's your family? You try that. They don't answer the phone. They won't answer the phone. They know who's calling. They know what day it is, and they don't want to deal with it. So there isn't really sometimes a complete answer right then and there. Like I said, I mean, we really try to lean on some of these day centers so that, they have a little bit more stability of getting longer term help, because yeah, we can find an emergency shelter for him for maybe one night, but that doesn't solve her problem with, now he's lost his job. She's lost her job. She's addicted. Where are the kids? What are the circumstances? And where are they getting food from? So,
and a lot of places, do they take children or no?
No.
I didn't think so, because I mean, so much of the research that we do.
And at that point, they're going to lose their kids to the state until they can get themselves back together. And you and I have both had tenants that have come to us and said, oh, well, we're working on getting our kids back, and that's because they couldn't provide for them. And so the state had to get involved.
And I think that's an interesting conversation too, that we should maybe touch on another time. But the whole topic of having children in a shared house, certainly in drug and alcohol recovery places, and we just pulled up something on the website that we're sharing right now, and this is actually in a different country, just so you guys know, but we thought that the links might be helpful for signs and symptoms of drug abuse and things. And it does say what addiction is not. It's not a choice, a failing, willpower, etc., something to be ashamed of. But essentially, I think it's an interesting topic about the children, because even at Katie's House Foundation, to date, we're allowed to have children only in the presence of their guardian, which means the guardian has to actually be looking at them, watching them, right? But do we want to have children in an environment where it's roommate housing, whether that's double occupancy or single or even triple in some cases? Not at Katie's house, but at other places that we're aware of.
The only places that I ever had that experience was undisclosed locations that were involved in some type of domestic violence situation, that they were actually housing these people in secret, which, you're not even allowed to call out on the radio what the location is that you're going to for that reason. But those are the only times where I actually had a couple of specially designed houses that have bigger rooms for the mother and their children to live at.
So do you think we need more of those in particular? Not just mother, but
I think what's lacking in overall is the ability for somebody that's getting a divorce that has a child or two to be able to have a situation where they don't, if they can't afford their own place, there isn't any type of, I don't know if they could, like we could come up with some kind of like duplex type places where we take a house and we kind of split it in half, and we allow families to live on, one side and the other side.
It's an interesting thing financially, because it's hard to do those things and get loans for them. And people who have a lot of money, you guys, they may have houses, but honestly, they're making so much money that it's hard to get their attention to get involved with things. But so Julie, to your point, I think having like a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house and just saying that, like, I mean, I don't know that we'd put a wall down the middle and have 2 kitchens or something.
Yeah.
But maybe, I mean, that's what shared housing, actually, the term shared housing did originate from, was having like 2 families share a house. And also we have multi-generational housing, right? But those are actual families, versus in shared housing, you might have, a mother and a daughter. They could be whatever age they are, but they might have 2 bedrooms, and then you might have a different family completely have the other 2 bedrooms. And Katie's house is not against doing something like that. It's just a matter of, always pairing people to live together is such an interesting thing. But I think back to the conversation around children, I know that I would not want to be separated from my child if I were either addicted or if I were sober. And I think it's even motivation, whether they're in your care or not in their care. But at some point, you might just kind of like say, I give up, right? And that's where people just tap out. But if you have them in their life, I think that just from my personal experience with my parents, where I didn't live with them, and because of being addicted and homeless and things like that, I think it would have helped them if I would have been maybe nearby. I think there's a fear that you're never going to get your kids back once they go to the system. Do you think that's true?
Well, yeah, I think that it gives them motivation to stay clean and to get that, it's not just quote getting the kids back. It's having that ability to be involved in their life, and that, you feel like, they're actually getting, their life back on track, but at the same time, they're not derailing you. So it's a fine line though, because I've seen a lot of parents that they just shouldn't be parents, they're just not capable of doing it. And they'll pretend like they are for 20 minutes, but then the minute I leave, I know that the kid's worse off, it's just not going to work. I mean, I know you're coming from a different point of view, right? You're coming from the point of view of, I'm the kid. I want my parents around.
Yeah.
It's not always like it says here, it's not a choice sometimes, that you might have started self-medicating, but at some point, it's not going to become a choice. You could be chemically addicted, and it's going to be very, very difficult to stop yourself. But I've also seen that. I've seen mothers who had, like I had these two boys that were kind of troublemakers, and they, their mother was a heroin addict, and I knew her well. And it was like, I never thought in a million years that she would become clean. And over my career, she did come clean, and she, not that that was the, least, the less amount of calls, but eventually it was less and less calls. She did become clean, and she amazed me.
So you can correlate that. You can correlate sobriety with the number of calls that you get in a police station.
Maybe at a house, she moved locations. I mean, I think she lived in 4 or 5 different areas, but by the time my career was winding down, we didn't get any calls at their house that they currently lived at after she had become clean.
And were the kids acting out? Do you remember more when she was?
The kids, I think they more or less followed in the footsteps of their parents, and they were troublemakers. And I think they, we tried to set them on the path to correction young, so they were less likely to become, regular offenders when they got older. And it seemed to work. As mom got cleaner, I think she and herself said, hey guys, you can't act like that. You can't do that.
So you think with the mom being clean, of course, that was what she preached, but when she wasn't clean,
all bets were off. Yeah.
All bets were off. Yeah. And so somebody has to break the cycle.
Well, like she eventually broke the cycle for herself, not to say that, I think she had 2 boys. And I think in the end, I obviously had one at the school that I dealt with a lot. And as he got older, he was the youngest. I could see that, he wanted to do better than the older kid, and he became a little bit better as time went on.
What do you think? Sorry to interrupt. What do you think kids should do when they're in this situation and they want to do better? And if they go to their school counselor or police officer, and the police officer or the school doesn't take action, I mean, what if?
Well, I mean, it's difficult because as much as you and I both have faith in the system, when it comes to child protective services, and regardless of what state you're in, there's only so much they can do. I know in Illinois, they recently changed. They used to have a law that said that if you were 12 or younger, you couldn't be left alone. And now they've opened that up, and there's no age on there. So as long as you can prove that you're acting mature and your kids are doing what they're supposed to be doing, there's no age. There's no actual age anymore where it's like, oh, he's 12, but he acts like he's 5, he could be alone. So now they took that away. So I guess it could go either way, right? You could act like you could be 5 and act like you're 12, or you could be 12 and act like you're 5, and now they can do something about it. So, but I think in the most cases, it's going to turn out that, these parents are leaving maybe an 8-year-old alone that they think acts like a 12-year-old, but really isn't. So that's going to be the catch. But I think, as we get, older and we see things, I think as a kid, I would want to hang around people that I see are doing the things that I know are the correct things to do. And that maybe I don't have the best role model at home, but I can find a friend that has a better role model than me, and I can learn from them. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. More to the dire question of a child that's homeless. What does a child that's homeless do? I mean, just keep talking to their friends' parents, but they don't want to leave their parent, right? Some of them are scared because they've only known their mother or father, but it's such a predicament for a child.
Well, I think if we actually did take a poll for high school kids that are homeless, you'll find that their parents have told them to leave, that they are misbehaving, they aren't doing what the parents think they should be doing. And, I think it comes from a gamut of, some parents are really bad role models. And I think there's parents that are super strict role models. And those kids are the kids that are getting told to get out of the house. You're either a really bad role model and you don't want to pay for the kid anymore, and you don't, the kid's old enough and is telling you, Mom, stop doing that, stop doing drugs. And the kid's saying, this to the parents, I'm going to call the police on you. And what does the parents say? Get out of the house. I don't want you here anymore. And the kid's like, well, she's not going to call the police and say I'm missing, right? Because she doesn't want me here. And then you got the other side of the coin where you've got so strict and so demanding that the kid's like, I can't do this, And so
balance as a parent.
Yeah.
And then kids, of course, are just kind of stuck with whatever the parents are doing. And then back to, if you're a 12-year-old and your parents are using drugs or acting, strangely, I mean, what can that 12-year-old do? Really nothing, right? I mean, in my case, I actually was in that case and I did get the school involved, and this luckily.
And that's what I would tell you is that the safest place to be at is the school. And that's where you should spend most of your time at. And that's where you should find your peace and your solace and your examples. And yeah, get the school involved.
Okay, good. All right. Well, this ran a little bit long. Thank you all for staying with us. It's so important that we all talk about so many things in politics and this and that and housing and money. And the truth is everyone's human. That's really what we're talking about here, is the humans who are, in this case, this week, there's 5 or 6 or actually 7 people that are impacted by this one situation where it could have happened to anybody. And now you have, children who are homeless, adults who are homeless. And it's like, you could see it coming for years. Everyone could see it coming for years. And they could see it coming for years. And yet they just never thought that it was going to come to such a bad situation that now the children are stuck, homeless. And eventually, I'm sure the state will get involved and probably some people will lose custody. And hopefully the kids will be okay in all of this. But it's amazing that 3 years ago, it was so different. And so if we can all just get a hold of things early on somehow, that would be great. But thanks for tuning in. And Julie, you have anything else?
Like and subscribe, make comments below. We'll always answer, and see you next week.
All right.